Hey everyone, Dr. Lee Bryce with your week 3 video. So let's go ahead and get started. Today we're going to be covering, chapters 8, 9, and 10 on marriage, family, and heteronormativity, then technology and social networks, ending with consumer culture and the social self. We'll also be talking about the midterm exam, which is this week, so I'll try and get through the content as fast as possible. Housekeeping, lecture, exit pass, and reminders is on the agenda today. So, in terms of housekeeping, you had your breaking a norm paper and activity due last week, week 2. So, be on the lookout for feedback from me because there is a writing component to our class. You have the opportunity to receive feedback and potentially do revisions for your paper should you need to do that. So, keep that in mind as you go through the comments and the feedback and you receive your grade all on Blackboard. And then the other thing we need to discuss in terms of housekeeping is the midterm exam. So, just as a reminder, you have details about the midterm and the final, actually, all assignments on the syllabus, which tells you that the midterm and final exams are multiple choice and true false. There might be one short response. If there is, it'll be approximately 3 to 5 sentences, and it'll be worth 5 points. You also have your midterm study guide available to download on Blackboard, so you should already be going through all that, getting your notes together and studying and preparing and that sort of thing. Also, in week 2, I asked you on the exit pass if there's an optional review session via Zoom in real time, what days and times work best for you. So hopefully you'll be able to attend that and you can get some preparation in that way. The exam will go live on Blackboard. I will send out an announcement, which will be emailed to everyone in the class when that midterm is live. And then you'll have until our due date, which is Sunday at 11:59 p.m. week 3 to complete the midterm. However, once the exam is open, you have that full period to take it. You just can't go over the time limit, which is an hour and 5 minutes, unless, of course, you have extended time because of your accommodations, in which case you will have that extended time. But the exam will cut off at 11:59 p.m. for everyone. So if you have extended time, make sure you start the exam a little bit early to take advantage of the full amount of time that you receive. If you have any questions about concepts and terms on the study guide, you should be emailing me beforehand. If you have any questions about logistical things such as how to take an exam on Blackboard, feel free to email me. Hopefully you'll be able to attend that Zoom session. And then if you have any IT issues, any logistical issues while you're taking the exam, email me as soon as possible so I can help troubleshoot. You should also be prepared with the ITS help desk phone number readily available for you and their email address so that you can also keep them in the loop, again, if you have any logistical ITS related issues. All right, moving right along. So, chapter 8. Again, FYI, whenever I do lecture in these videos and in the PowerPoints, this is just an overview of the chapter. I don't cover all concepts and key terms, but you are responsible for all concepts and key terms for every chapter that is notated on the midterm exam study guide. So make sure that you're defining all of the key terms, even the ones I don't cover in my lecture and on the PowerPoint slides when you're preparing for exams. All right, with that being said, we're going to start with family. This is a term that most of us have a basic understanding of. However, it's important to note that the idea of family is socially constructed, so ideas might vary cross-culturally. A family is a social group usually related by marriage, partnership, adoption, or kinship. There are different types of families. Economics is often taken into consideration, and especially if you think about which family members you live with and you see on a regular basis. And then romance and love often comes into play, but again, cross-culturally, there's a lot of variation in what that might look like. One of the examples I always like to give that was given when I took an intro social class when I was an undergrad is if you're familiar with the TV show The Golden Girls. So you have these 4 women who are retired. They're living together in a condo in Miami, and only 2 of the 4 women are related by blood. So there's a mother-daughter combo. However, they all live together and they consider to be family. They consider each other as family. And so there's one storyline where Blanche, who is not related by blood to any of the other three women living together, she has surgery. She wakes up from surgery. She's in the hospital. The doctors and nurses ask her if she needs anything. And she says, I want my girls. I want my girls. I want my family. And they're like, oh, your daughter's on her way. And she's like, no, I want my girls. And she's referring to the women that she lives with, because for her, that's her kinship. That's her family. That's who she most wants to see. But because we socially construct family to mean blood relatives, at least in the United States, that's who the medical professionals think of when she says she wants her girls and she wants her family. So just think about, how do we socially construct family? And perhaps that might be different for you compared to other people in the class, depending on how you were raised and the norms you were raised with. All right. As far as marriage and family life, one of the theories that is discussed in this chapter is referred to as the second shift. It's the idea that many women perform a first shift of paid work and a second shift of domestic responsibilities. Now, Arlie Hochschild, who coined this term, she hypothesized when she started her study that as more and more women, not only were they going into the workforce more, but they were having these really professional careers where they were making really good income. Sometimes they were making the same, if not more, than their husbands. So she hypothesized that as they gain equity in professional spaces, they would also gain equity with household responsibilities and child rearing, so chores and things like that. However, what she found is even women who were middle class, upper middle class, working in these really professional careers, even when they were making good money, they still did the bulk of the household chores and the child rearing, and they weren't receiving equitable help from their husbands most of the time. And if we think about the way that household chores are gendered, the household chores that men do, it's not to say men aren't helping out around the house or not doing their fair share, but the types of things they often do because of how we gender chores are things that aren't urgent and are things that don't tend to take as much time compared to the chores around the house that are coded as being feminine. So the things that, think about the household chores that your dad and your brothers did growing up, or if you're a man, that you did growing up, taking out the trash, taking out the recycling, mowing the lawn. Those things are not as urgent as, say, making a meal or doing laundry. You have to have food, you have to have your meals regularly, and you have to have clean clothes for school and work, right? Those are urgent and they have to be done regularly. If you wait a day to take out the trash, sure, the kitchen might smell bad, but ultimately you can wait another day or two before you have to take the trash out and things get serious, right? We also know that things like mowing the lawn or taking out the trash don't take as much time as, say, shopping for a meal, preparing it, cleaning up afterwards, and so forth, or even things like doing the laundry feel constant, like you're always trying to stay ahead of it and you can't. So that's what the second shift is about. Heteronormativity is the belief that normalizes and naturalizes heterosexuality, which is a sexual attraction between women and men. So, this idea that a nuclear family is going to be a man and a woman, a husband and a wife with 2.5 kids, white picket fence, that stereotype, right? We know that a lot of a lot of family units in the United States don't necessarily look that way, despite the fact that that stereotype persists, especially if we think about pop culture and families and pop culture and that sort of thing. I would also argue that even couples that are in a same sex relationship, in a same sex marriage, mimic heteronormativity. And heteronormativity is pushed upon same sex couples. There are still a lot of stereotypes that persist about same sex relationships where one person is supposed to be more masculine and one person is supposed to be more feminine. So it's this idea that same sex couples are still supposed to adhere to heteronormativity, even if their relationship dynamic doesn't necessarily. Heteronormativity is so pervasive in our society. Finally, as far as marriage, we can think about the wedding industrial complex, which is the escalation of wedding expenses over the past few decades. This idea, and this sort of connects to some of the earlier chapters on consumerism and capitalism and that sort of thing. We get these big grand weddings, and there's this expectation that when you get married, you're supposed to have those things. But in reality, it's really expensive, and perhaps that money could be spent on paying off your student loan debt or purchasing a house and that sort of thing. But we think we have to have these big, expensive weddings, and that they need to look in very heteronormative ways. Okay, so we've learned about the second shift, but there are alternative theories for understanding marriage and family dynamics and sort of what that labor looks like. And so I want to introduce to you a sort of an alternative theory to understanding those dynamics called Wages Against Housework by this theorist here, Silvia Federici. So on your own time, watch this YouTube clip and make sure you're familiar with it. It might come up on, I don't know, the midterm exam or your discussion board that's due this week. As a reminder, all content on all PowerPoints and lectures is your responsibility for assignments. So if there's a link for a YouTube video, for example, like there is here, you should watch that on your own time because you are responsible for it for assignments. All right, chapter 9. Technology and social networks. Technology compresses material objects, all tools, machines, devices. So we tend to think of technology as just like computers and smartphones and things like that. But it's also the cultural factors, including the skills for production and use of these tools. So just because you have access to technology, you also need to understand how to use it. Think about if you're having to explain how to use a smartphone feature to your parents or your grandparents, that sort of thing. Integral accident is the idea that technology creates its own problems that are integral to the technology. So we think that technological advances make our world easier and better, but oftentimes there are sort of these unintended consequences that develop as a result of new technology. And what does that mean for our society as a whole? How do we address these new issues that come up? So a good example of thinking about some of the ramifications and the ripple effects of technological advancements would be something like AI. And that's a really new, relevant issue that we as theorists and members of society, just in general, may not necessarily fully understand how we're going to resolve those issues or even the full extent of what those issues are, because AI technology and those advancements is so new. Moral panic is widespread anxiety about a phenomenon such as new technology or a group such as youth that is seen to threaten society. So sort of the classic example that was always given when I was an undergraduate student was in relationship to moral panics was this idea that during Halloween, there was a good chance that kids' candy was going to have poison in it. Or be drugged. Like that rarely happens, but yet there's this moral panic that this happens a lot. And part of the reason why we have moral panics is because misinformation is dispersed through media outlets like the news, like social media nowadays. So just sort of think about how moral panic can spread. Do we have a moral panic concerning AI technology? Maybe we do. Maybe some of those concerns are well founded, but those are sort of some of the things we can grapple with in this chapter on technology and social networks. Prosumers. Smartphones and internet technology facilitate prosumers, which turns consumers into prosumers or producer consumers. So it's this idea that you're collaboratively producing content and material and technology things, but you're also a consumer because you're paying for those things. So think about if you create web content for social media, you're creating memes and stuff like that. You're producing that, but you're also consuming it because you probably had to pay for an app or the rights to a particular image, that sort of thing. And again, that's just one example. And then we can also think about the role of virtual communities when we think about technology and what that means for sociology. Because in sociology, we're constantly thinking about society and the way individuals interact within society. But what does it mean with technological advancements that we can have those social connections completely online with people we've never met in real life? So, on that note, chapter 9 and reality TV. So, virtual communities are spaces where folks from historically marginalized communities can connect globally. What does that mean for reality TV? Well, a lot of TV shows, not just reality TV, but a lot of TV shows will have online forums where folks can discuss issues and topics that come up in their favorite TV shows, creating a sense of community with people that they've never met in real life that they wouldn't necessarily have the chance to connect with if it weren't for these virtual community spaces, right? Okay. And so some of the examples I give come from one of my favorite reality TV shows, which is Survivor. I got really into it during the pandemic. We all had a TV show we binge watched. Mine was Survivor. And so here, there's a point in the TV show's history where they start having quotas for how much of the cast of Survivor, and actually all the reality TV shows on this particular network, how diverse they are. So a certain number of cast members for reality TV shows now have to be people of color, people who identify as part of the LGBTQ plus community. And they actually have those quotas for the people who are creators on the show as well. So for details on those policies, you can read this article linked here, New Reality TV Casting Rules. And then one of the outcomes or one of the things that results on the season of Survivor after those policies came into place is we see a lot of diversity in terms of casting, which leads to really rich conversations around the LGBTQ plus community and race. And so I want you to watch these clips on your own time because I think it does a really good job of facilitating more meaningful conversations that are a little deeper than surface level that you might see on like a sitcom, for example, related to these two community, or sorry, the LGBT plus community and people of color. And so here, Jeff Probst, the host of Survivor, he asks the cast members if they think he should stop using the phrase, you guys, which was a phrase he had used regularly for every season whenever he was getting the cast members to come and do a challenge. And after he asked that question, all of the cast members, everyone in the shot, their eyes all look towards someone who looks visibly queer. They look visibly part of the LGBTQ plus community. And there's this expectation that this one person is going to speak on behalf of the entire LGBTQ plus community. And you see how that plays out in really problematic ways and how it's this learning moment where the cast members realize that they need to listen to everyone, not just people who they think look like they might be part of the LGBTQ plus community because of stereotypes. And we see Jeff learning in real time that perhaps he should change the language he's using to be more inclusive. And I think that learning moment is really real because sometimes people learn that what they're saying is not the correct thing, and then they change their language and they move on. And then the two parts about race, you have Black cast members talking about being tokenized and how a lot of times Black characters, or sorry, castmates on Survivor have been picked off one by one, and all Black alliances historically on Survivor have not lasted, and how it's actually Black women, how these Black women are going to or feel like they have to operate on the show because of stereotypes and because of the way Black women have been portrayed on the show historically. And so it's this moment where people can really learn, certainly the cast members who are white, who are listening to these stories, and Jeff Probst, the host who is white, can learn about how women of color and people of color have been treated on the show. But we, as members of our society, as viewers, can also learn something about how do we facilitate conversations around race? How do we talk about these things? How do we listen to people of color as they share their experiences? And so I encourage you to watch those things when you get a chance. Okay. Consumer culture and the social self. Our self. It's our understanding of how we think and feel we are as individuals and how we sort of are distinct from other members of our society. In terms of relating it back to foundational theory, if we think about symbolic interactionism, the social world is created through everyday relationships and interactions. We construct meanings, including meanings about ourselves and our identities, through interactions with others. So we're thinking about our interactions with other people when we think about ourselves as individuals. This brings us to Cooley's theory of the looking glass self, which is that our sense of self is always relational. It develops through imagining how others perceive and evaluate us. So it's not necessarily how people actually perceive and evaluate us, but how we think they do, right? Because we always have that lens of how we think about things coming through. We could also think about the I and the me. But the I is the impulsive part of a self, one's likes and wants, and the me is a socialized self, developed through socialization, which we talked about, I believe, in chapter 2. Identity is a sociological concept that refers to differential aspects of ourselves. Our identities relate to social structures and our roles. Stigma is a deeply devaluing attribute or a sort of way to spoil our identity, viewed as both different and undesirable. And then we've talked a little bit about social institutions. It's a foundational term to sociology. But in this chapter, we also learn about total institutions, which is building upon social institutions more broadly, comes from Irving Goffman's work. And it's this idea that some social institutions cut people off entirely from the rest of society for a prolonged period. Some classic examples are psychiatric wards, prison. I would also argue higher education. And I've had students who do ROTC or who are vets say that the military is also a total institution. It cuts you off from people who are outside of that institution, and it really regulates your everyday social interactions in strict ways. It controls who you're around regularly, what food you eat, where you eat, when you do things, when you sleep, when you eat your meals, all those different aspects of your life. Okay, review. Methodology. So one of the things I really like about the textbook is that throughout the chapters, the authors sort of weave in different social science methodology. So I really want to make sure students understand the difference between quantitative and qualitative research. Now, within those two overarching types of research, there's a bunch of different types of methodology that your textbook authors cover, and you should be familiar with them, especially if something is a key term from a chapter that's going to be covered on the midterm. However, when you walk away from this class and you go on to take other sociology CJ classes, I want you to be able to, at a minimum, distinguish between quantitative and qualitative methodology. Okay, so what is quantitative? If you think about the root word quant, this has to do with numbers, right? So really rooted in statistics, statistical analysis. You get large survey data and you put that into a software package like SPSS or Stata, and then you do different statistical analysis. Qualitative, again, I don't really know the root word there, but this is stuff that has to do with words. So we're dealing with interview data, content analysis, focus groups, things like that. At a minimum, you should walk away knowing about that. And I don't know if there were to be a short response question on the midterm or final exam. It might be something where you have to explain the differences between quantitative and qualitative methodology, providing some examples of each. All right, here's your exit pass link. I will also send that out to you via email. As a reminder, finished reading up to chapter 10, complete discussion post 4. You have your midterm exam. And despite all the assignments that you have, and you're probably also starting to think about coming back to campus in person if you haven't already, and your spring term, try and enjoy your week. All right, I will talk to you soon. Bye, everyone.